Welcome back. You tune into Inspired Afternoons with me, your host, Maria Mia. And now we moving on to something really, really serious and sad. And hence, that is why I played All We Need Is Love by his brother Zayn Bika, because there's so much anger going around. And yes, this is on the back of what sparked this current conversation on bullying is the incident that occurred whereby a student was attacked. Lufuna was was attacked, and this led because the screenshot went viral of her fellow pupil slapping her a number of times. This led to her taking her own life. So, an incident of bullying ended tragically, and now a minor is reprimanded and held in custody according to a child's law and child's act. But our discussion today is with a very, very accomplished advocate for child rights, and that is Advocate Zitha Hansungule. Good afternoon, Zita, and welcome to Inspired Afternoons here on Salam Media.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
It wasn't long ago where I spoke to the spokesperson for MEC for Gauteng, Steve Mobana, regarding bullying. And I think this was about not even 3 months ago in terms of the bullying policy and this. And then bullying reared his ugly head again, and this time, which led to a tragic loss of life. Why are we so angry? Why our learners becoming so angry? It seems at the slightest provocation, the bullying is becoming more and more violent, the intensity, but yet the provocation is getting lesser and lesser, but the intensity of the violent pupil or learner upon pluma is increasing. Why are we such an angry society, or why are our learners so angry?
Well, I think this is a question that requires us to look into individual children's lives. So one has to ask, what specifically caused this learner to act in this particular way? Is there something happening in the family, in the community? Is the learner, or are learners in need of intervention? Are their families in need of intervention? What is happening in their background, in their lives, that causes children to respond in manners like bullying? So this is a broader question of family and community environment.
Yes, and the alleged perpetrator is a 14-year-old girl. I mean, at 14 years old, we have such a propensity for violence. And then, sadly, learner Lufano was only 15 years old. And I mean, for her, she internalized it to such an extent. And yes, aggravated by social media, thing going viral, that was the only hope. Ending her life was, for her, the only solution at that time. And sadly, I think before she had any professional help, counseling or anything, a grave indeed tragedy that had occurred. And I think it's now a real wake-up call. Where do we go from here now? And also, the 14-year-old is still a child. Remediative behavior, corrective behavior. Do we then expose this 14-year-old to the full meat of the law in terms of the courts, in terms of being incarcerated? How do we protect, and how do we see this as a behavior, that corrective behavior? What is the way? Because this is indeed violent crimes, but yes, these are children. So in your experience, how do we then rehabilitate such an individual, such a learner, and young learner?
Well, I think the first thing we need to be looking at is the fact that we do have a Child Justice Act that sets out procedures in which learners, children who are accused of crimes, can be taken through. So now, for this learner, I think when a charge was made against her criminal charge, it must have been one related to assault. Therefore, assault being a criminal act, she's now been taken through the process created by the Child Justice Act. And the Child Justice Act is very clear in the fact that its main aim, its basis, is to divert children away from the criminal justice system, or rehabilitate children and make them citizens that are contributing to society. So the Child Justice Act in conjunction with the Children's Act, creates programs where children can be diverted away from the criminal justice system and either sent to programs, either have family or community intervention, depending on what the need of the particular child is, depending on the severity of the crime that has been committed, as well as depending on the needs of the victim or the victim's family. So a holistic look at the situation, especially at the individual situation of the child.
Zita, well, I've just learned that the charge is now escalated to actually attempted murder or murder charge that has been, so it's no longer assault. So this is a very serious charge, but the process would still be the same.
Yes. Yes. So the process would still be the same. This is actually a more serious crime, and the process will still be the same, where the child is taken through the process created by the Child Justice Act. Obviously, we're looking at sort of punishments that are different in nature because of the seriousness of the crime. So depending on what the prosecutors are looking for, depending on the evidence that is brought before a court, there's a variety of punishments, if one could say, that could be given, from being sent to what we call a diversion program. So a program that is meant to divert a child away from the criminal justice system, from criminal elements, to being sentenced to a child and youth care center, what we call secure care centers, instead of being sentenced to adult prisons. They could be sentenced to secure care centers for a period of time. So we have varying degrees of punishments, one could say.
And I think guiding the principle in terms of child justice is best interest of the child principle. That will always be the guiding light and determination in any of the processes and procedures. Is I think the underlying theme there, and I think consideration will be always best interest of the child principle.
Exactly. So again, it takes us back to the fact that one of the processes set out in the Child Justice Act is a probation officer, which is a social worker qualified to work in the criminal justice system. A probation officer has to carry out an investigation into the circumstances of the child's life, the circumstances of the crime, what's going on in the family and community of the child. The probation officer will then make recommendations based on that. So the probation officer is looking at the specific situation of the child's life and making recommendations based on what would be in the best interest, what would be the best outcome for the case in terms of punishment and the way going forward.
But Zita, do the families of the victims have a say then? Because surely they want, after what had transpired, as a family of the victim, they would then, irrespective of age, would demand that, you know what, the perpetrator faces the full might of the law. So where do we draw the balance? Because this is now just not an assault, but this led to a suicide. So this is next level. I think it's going to be groundbreaking in South Africa because, yes, there were serious injuries in the past and that, but I can't recall a time where this has now resulted in a suicide or in a death. Yeah, sometimes I know there was a case of prolonged teasing and bullying, as well as psychological trauma that somebody taken their life, but this was due to a violent incident and then a very short duration, and then a learner takes their life. So this is going to be probably a groundbreaking. And are you looking to see that there would be new inputs in terms of how this case is handled and in terms of responsibilities?
Right. So the Child Justice Act doesn't run away from the fact that there are various parties involved when criminal matters are being taken forward. So we don't. The Child Justice Act and the child justice system does not run away from the fact that there are victims who are involved in the crimes. There are victims' families who are involved in the crimes. So whenever judges have to make decisions, they also look at those factors. They also look at the fact that there is a victim who has been impacted by a crime, and they also look at the fact that they look at the seriousness of a crime, and they also look at what is in the best interest of society as well, in addition to looking at the interests and appropriate punishment that should be given to a child offender which takes into account rehabilitation. So there are a number of things that courts and the child justice system look at in order to come to the best decision for the particular situation. So everything is taken into account in that regard.
Zita, once a child has actually been found guilty and they have been sentenced, do they then have a criminal record as you do with an
Yes.
adult offender?
Yes, yes. So once a child has been found guilty of a crime and they are sentenced to some sort of punishment as set out in the law, they do have a criminal record. And yeah, so they do have a criminal record that is kept on the SAPS database, and that is something that lives with them for a period of time where they will then, after a number of years,
Zita,
like
can you hear
adults,
me?
have the chance to apply to have expunged. But in the ultimate, yes, they do have. In the
Zita,
ultimate, they
we
do
have
have a criminal record.
Zita, I have a caller on the line. I see I've got Ahmed Saluji from Lenasia, and he wants to contribute as well. He has a comment. Peace and blessings to you, Ahmed Saluji, and welcome to Inspired Afternoons. Your comment. You can go ahead. Yes, and that's what Zita has been explaining to us. The Child Justice Act is very clear on this. It looks as a holistic life of the learner. Their background is taken into consideration. Zita just said an officer, investigating officer, will be appointed investigating into the child's life circumstances, background, any aggravating circumstances, then look at the victim, their families, and then this will all be brought to court and presented before a judge. Am I correct in my summation of it, Zita?
Yes, you are quite correct. Definitely.
Okay, brother Ahmad, thank you for your contribution. And Zita, I'm sure this is the case you're going to also watch closely in terms of the processes and procedures as well.
Yes, it is something that we will be watching very closely to ensure that all of the processes, procedures set out by the Child Justice Act, the Children's Act, and surrounding laws are followed and complied with.
Okay. And Zita, before I let you go, what about educating learners in terms of anger management, how to handle their emotions, also using this in many other incidents as examples? What can happen in a fit of anger, rage of anger? Within 2 or 3 minutes, your life can take a different direction. I mean, all your aspirations of how you want to contribute to society, your career, your aspirations, that can be just called like this. So getting learners to think before they act or react. Do you think we have enough programs like this, or the department should be really seriously putting this as top priority in terms of anger management and proper decision making, especially at times when you are provoked?
What I do know is that the Department of Education and Social Development have programs in that regard in terms of teaching children how to respond to violence and how to respond to different situations. But there's definitely, I agree with you, there's definitely room for improvement. There's definitely room for capacitating schools more to be able to teach children how to respond to different situations in a clear thinking manner. Definitely situations for capacitating children and teachers as well on how to talk about these different issues and how to respond better. Definitely there's room for growth there.
I think conflict resolution is a major, major skill we need to inculcate in our learners because, I mean, a 14-year-old, this life is ahead of them, but yet a tragedy, and now somebody incarcerated having to go through this process, maybe just 5 minutes of anger, of madness, so-called madness. Thanks so much for your contribution, Zita. I am going to follow the trial and probably get you on again if necessary for your comment and input as the trial progresses.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. We're going to go for a short break and then we're going to have additional comment regarding the topic of bullying per se.